Welcome to the Sustainable Industry Podcast, the transformation resource for net zero leadership. I'm Nick Cox, your net zero champion here at Sustainable Industry, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Amy Pease, the innovation lead for circular economy from the Innovate UK, and Katherine Adams, who is the technical director at the Alliance of Sustainable Building Products and a director at Reusably Limited. We spoke today about the challenges of circularity in the built environment, practical ways these are being addressed, both from pre-demolition audits through to material inventories. We looked at the opportunities to reimagine how we approach the frictions between the theory and the reality of circularity within the built environment, and how other sectors can be piggybacking some of the progress made by the construction sector around circularity. I asked, first of all, if we could get an overview of the work promoting circularity within the built environment and where they're seeing successes. Let's get straight into it.
Well, maybe if I take a step back and just sort of explain a little bit about what circularity is in the built environment, because it encompasses quite a lot, really. So you've obviously got circularity related to materials more so, which is when we look at making sure materials stay in their highest value. So that means really trying to make sure that they're used to their full potential, and making sure that the materials that we use are have recycled content in, or from a secondary recycled source, or even reused materials. But a lot of that comes from where you're going to get the materials. So quite a lot of the thinking is from this sort of donor recipient type model of buildings, and that all encompasses sort of the building as material banks concept. So if I've got a building and I'm going to refurbish it or demolish it, how can I extract those materials for them to be reused or recycled in another building? And then combined with that is when I'm designing a new building or infrastructure, making sure that those materials and that building is going to sort of last and function as it should. So there you bring in sort of more design principles, if you like, in terms of sort of design for flexibility, adaptability, and design for end of life. So you're looking at how we put these sort of products and components in, but make sure then we can get them out as well, in order for them to preferably be reused where that's appropriate, or recycled. That's quite a quick snapshot.
I mean, I think something you said there on the sort of material side of things, obviously some of the discussions we've had, the difference between considering the materials in a building and then the products and components, as you've said. And we're seeing a lot more, I think, sort of trends towards people wanting to keep products as products. So we see the escalator as a escalator that could be used again, and not just a couple of tons of metals that could be smelted down and things. So you said kind of keeping value as high as possible, but sometimes that distinction between sort of materials and products becoming really key.
Yeah, really important. And I think especially when you look in a building, and it's obviously a bit different to manufacturing, because manufacturing, that product stays a product, but quite often in a building, a product, it's made of a material, it becomes a product, and then that product may also be then part of a system within the building as well. So it does require a bit of a sort of a different, sort of not different mindset, but kind of just a slightly different way of thinking about it, and as Amy said, not really to reduce it to that sort of base material level also.
And how then would companies in that space go about understanding a bit of a stock take in terms of what materials are contained within these buildings, if, like you say, the lifetime can be huge? How would that work?
Yeah, so at the moment we have tools called pre-demolition audits. So that's obviously for buildings that are already built. They can be quite time consuming if you really want to do a good job. Unfortunately, for a lot of buildings that are already built, they don't really have that good information on what materials are in the building, how it's constructed. The plans aren't there really, so it can be quite a onerous job to work that all out. And especially if you want to be able to reuse products, I should say, rather than materials. you do need quite a lot of information on them. So pre-demolition audits or pre-refurbishment audits are quite a key tool, and there is a requirement now to do them in part anyway in London for bigger developments through GLA, the Greater London Authority, and their circular economy statements. One of the projects we've done with Innovate UK funding is our pre-dem project. I can't quite remember what it stands for. But that was got that. So pre-dem, and that's a really interesting project, because that is trying to develop a methodology where you can sort of work out from existing information what's already in a building. So can I work 80% out and then only go and check the 20%? And that's aimed at social housing much more. And it's easy to do that sort of thing in that area because the typologies, the building typologies are very similar. And there's also quite a lot of quickly accessible data. That worked really as well, because when you're starting to talk to sort of local authorities, social housing providers, that sort of thing, they just don't factor that the massive materials and products that they've already got in their buildings in terms of their decision making. So to be able to give them that sort of information in a quite quick, easy way, also link it to carbon and embodied carbon, it's not gonna sort of push their decision over to the other side, but it is still a factor which needs to be thought about in the overall sort of consideration.
I mean, I found from that project some really interesting things, just what open source data could be plugged into tools to make it's much easier. Just simple things like using Google Maps to get a sense of the street view of is this just a box or is it two boxes squashed together type kind of building, and then sort of extrapolating from that and being able to just attach that to kind of your file and be able to say, yeah, this is the thing we're looking at.
Yeah, and then I think that's kind of the existing stock, understanding what's there, what you're having now in new buildings, still not happening a lot, but there is starting to be a lot more talk about it, and some of the larger developers are doing this is terms of much more of the sort of material passport building type log systems. And I think, Amy, you may be supporting one.
Yeah. So it was digital. There's a lot of sort of discussion on digital passports. I think in sort of specific projects you're kind of doing in looking at things like in the steel sort of industry, sort of steel products in the built environment. How do we track those? But also some of our other programs that are covering sort of traceability of materials. Is like, where do we get that cross learning from where this works well to where there are some extra challenges just because of the products involved? I mean, I think I've learned from one of the recent ones, just trying, where a QR code might work well on some products, if you put it on a steel beam, well, it's then likely to get treated once it's on site, get coatings on it, and then will that get rubbed off after X years? And will you be able to see the bit where the code was by the time it comes to actually trying to find that? Or do you put the code on the whole building and then go, oh, this is everything that's in the building? So
that's our e-tracks project you're talking about, isn't it? And something that should be quite simple, i.e. let's just mark something and then read the mark, and then that would tell me everything I need to know about that steel. Because if I know how that's, if I know the grade of the steel, if I know where it's been used, that really, really helps in terms of its potential to be reused again. But it should be simple, but it isn't, and that's because when we put these products into our buildings, as Amy said, they're long lasting. It gets sprayed in paint, so you can't see the mark anymore. Designers don't like the marks being there. If I'm looking at it from a pre-demolition audit point of view, if I only see a bit of it and the mark's not there, I presume the mark's not there. So I
think it was also even some of the scannable things, the fact that they don't work when they're attached to a steel beam because that interferes with the scanner. It's like, I'm going to use that technology.
So I'm keen to know a bit more about some of the where it works well and who can really leverage this. So you mentioned there's some of the challenges around data and the scale of the challenges there. who is going to be at an advantage to take use of this? Is this going to be the larger contractors, or is this going to be applicable to all of the smaller players too?
I think at the moment it's quite client driven, and it's more driven by clients who are a lot more sort of portfolio holders of assets, if you like. And I think it really should be just good practice, good business sense to know what's in your buildings. You shouldn't really need me to come along and do a pre-demolition audit. So I think there's a move towards that. I think regulation in terms of the whole sort of golden thread and building safety, I think that plays into this very, that's really important. And I sometimes think, I don't know if Amy will agree with me or not here, but that we tend to sort of, we talk about material passports and collecting all this information on circularity. But I sometimes think, circularity is just an add-on to all the other information you need. So we don't necessarily need to create new things the whole time. We just need to add little bits on here and there to what we're doing. And that sits a bit better with the industry, because trying to, construction industry can be quite slow to change and adapt. So trying to introduce new things all the time, it's just really difficult, especially when you're talking to the smaller companies as well, because they just haven't got, they haven't got the bandwidth to do that.
And actually, in our Transforming Construction program, there was sort of moves to try and bring in all those different value aspects, certainly at the kind of the start of construction. So there's kind of a value toolkit that was developed so that it provides a real framework for developers, contractors, other stakeholders to have that discussion about what is important for this build, and how do we not just make it about the economics, not just the environmental metrics, bring in all those kind of social factors and things that it's really hard to kind of trade off one against another and get them all on a page. So just having a kind of common framework for doing that, I think, has been a really useful way of trying to incorporate circularity and not make it another bolt-on thing, as you say, Katherine.
Yeah. And sorry. And with that, I just think it's also important to, and I know Amy's a big fan of this anyways, the systems thinking and making sure that you're just not looking at all these different topics in isolation, because they all do impact on each other, sometimes in a positive way and a negative way. So it's kind of not being siloed in one issue. And I think in construction, it's a lot of things are very much about carbon, as they should be, but we need to not lose sight of the other issues, which are equally important, you can argue.
Indeed. So in addition to pre-demolition audits, what other strategies can people in the built environment deploy to bake in as much circularity as possible?
Yeah. So one of the bigger areas, I guess, and one of the biggest wins is not creating material waste in the first place. And most of our waste is from demolition. A lot is from demolition. And so if we're not demolishing our buildings, and if we're refurbishing our buildings, that's a massive win. So you are seeing much more move towards that. I mean, there's been a bit in the media on that anyway, and a lot of that is stemming from planning, mainly in London, where they are really starting to question, why are you demolishing? Why can't you use this building that we already have? Extend it, convert it. So there's much more sort of robust justification now required for, or starting to be asked anyway, for demolition. And then that also feeds into the carbon argument as well. So it is very much, the two are very much linked together. So obviously you're not creating that waste, but then you're also not using the materials that you would need to, again, to build new. So that really is, that really is sort of, a big win. But saying that, there's lots of reasons why people want to demolish and rebuild new, not least money. Money.
So how do you counter things like obsolescence? So the material science and innovation in that space moves at lightning speed. How do you go about, if you're building something that's going to be in situ for 20, 30, 100 years, how do you go about understanding what innovations in material science might mean some of the materials that we used could be taken out?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one in construction. I would probably say, obsolescence isn't so much of an issue. It depends on the material and the product. But if you're looking at real sort of long life stuff like concrete, the structure, concrete, brick, steel, there isn't so much innovation in that space. It's the material that you could probably reuse again and again if it's designed correctly. I mean, the obsolescence comes in more with your with your shorter lived products, and that's probably, I think, more work. I'd encourage Innovate UK to look at this, is much more on the sort of services and plants that go into the buildings, because there is, that doesn't last as long as sometimes as it should, but quite sort of advanced sort of systems there really. So, that needs to be thought about a lot more. So I don't think
actually we have got a new program at the moment on heat, net zero heat. So they've taken quite sort of an innovative approach to how to get sort of projects together on this, instead of just going, here's an open competition, who's got ideas, but really sort of bringing together sort of communities of people to come up with innovative ways of how do we sustainably heat buildings in future, and then kind of build sort of consortia and sort of projects on the back of that. But yeah, there's a real sort of sense there of, we can't just push technologies like, here's a new technology, let's just add that to a building. Got to think a bit more holistically about kind of how that fits into the whole building, how it's all designed.
Yeah. There is an issue though, saying that you do get an issue, well, we call them sort of legacy materials, if you like, or I wrote something ages ago called difficult demolition waste as well, and the demolition sector sort of love to talk about this. So this
Not
is
just
where
asbestos there.
No. And it's, you are looking at products which are just really going to be quite difficult to manage at end of life. And it may be because of the sort of chemicals that have been used in them. You've got the persistent organic pollutants, which I know are in furniture, but they're also, they're used quite a lot in cables and insulation. So that's a problem. There's quite a big issue with wood and wood waste and the treated aspects of that from a chemical point of view. And I think understanding that's really important. But what we're putting into our products to make them function, make them work, but there's a whole mix of chemicals in there, and we really don't understand the effects of that, both in terms of the environment and us as people as well.
Yeah, it's quite a common question we ask of sort of people who sort of come with innovations that are, I've made a sustainable building product. It's used a waste material and we've squashed it together with loads of resin and other things, and now we've got a new material. Okay, so what happens to that at its end of life? And well, it could be all chopped down as so many things, but how's it going to get back to you? Well, does it need to be only that, waste stream going back to you? It really becomes a much more complicated sort of exercise when you get to that, beyond just getting it installed in a building. How do we actually manage its whole life cycle?
And how are you working with people that are doing the procurement of these materials to make sure they don't get excited about these new products that might have embedded chemicals or coatings that are not necessarily recoverable?
Yeah, so I'd probably say that quite a lot. So that a lot of the larger developers have got quite good sort of material schedules where they will seriously look at some of the products going in and the chemicals coming in. What is getting quite, I've been working on a few projects recently where we do our pre-demolition audits. We come up with some really good recommendations, and then it's like, what next? How do we implement some of those recommendations? And it is really, really tricky from a procurement point of view, because we may say, oh, we think these bricks may be reusable, but we don't do anything intrusive to know that. you're only actually going to know if they are reusable when you actually start sort of demolishing, and you know how if the bricks are going to come out in a sort of, you know, without being broken, or they haven't got loads of lime mortar on. So how do you sort of factor that into procurement? Can be quite tricky. So what we're sort of saying, you know, you need to do a sort of a business as usual scenario where everything tends to go to recycling versus a sort of, you know, improved model, if you like, and how much, you know, and sort of cost that differently. But then it also, you know, it also takes more time as well. So how that's factored in. So I think there's much more that we could do on procurement, definitely. And there's also sort of a push as well, I think, now to include a bit more in contracts, and definitely in terms of sort of recycled content and sort of waste diversion from landfill and waste minimisation, but probably not quite there on reuse.
I mean, on the procurement side, do you think we're heading towards a system where people are kind of getting reused materials from one business to another directly? Or do you think some of those issues are mitigated by having kind of third-party sort of contractors in the middle who take the waste materials and then kind of sell them on the same market as people would be buying new materials?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think there's room for both, really, and I really think it depends on the product and the material. So our Disrupt project, funded by Innovate UK. In fact, there was two. So the first Disrupt project really looked at doing that business model for steel reuse, and you do have the two models there which work really well. One where the building owner retains ownership of that steel, goes to a stockholder, they recertify it, and then it's reused back in the building. And then the other model is that the stockholder just buys that steel and then sells it on the open market. That's proved really, really effective. It works really well. Still, it has value, so it's easier to do in some respects than other products. And the industry have got together, developed a protocol where they can sort of re-CE market, so it doesn't cause an issue in terms of, you know, reinsurance, re-warranties, and that sort of thing. So that, but yes, you do probably need that, you know, that middle sort of stockholder at that point. But for things like carpet, no, that you don't need that sort of thing. But there's, encouragingly, we are seeing more manufacturers starting to do remanufacturing services, and I think quite a lot of construction manufacturers probably lag behind there. My personal opinion.
And are there any sort of specific certifications or any ways that we can, or people that are in the procurement, building on the procurement piece, can understand the weighting between a product that might have more embedded carbon versus a product that's more recyclable at end of life? I'm thinking things like we have B Corp organisations in manufacturing or what have you, and consumer goods. I just wondered if there is an equivalent in the built environment.
There's a few product databases around which will give you an idea of the products and their different types of impacts, both in terms of the carbon that they have and what happens to them at end of life. The construction industry has been quite good in doing a whole load of environmental product separations called EPDs, which are sort of a label, really, a life cycle assessment label for their products, which show the different impacts of those products. And then what you have now, and I'm sure Amy knows a few of them because Innovate UK probably funded a few, you now have a building life cycle assessment tools, which now sort of take those EPDs at a product level, and then you can sort of fit it all together like a jigsaw. Not very technical, at a building level. And as well as looking at carbon, you know, you do look at aspects of circularity there as well, in terms of sort of what happens potentially to those products at end of life and how much recycled content you've got. So I would say that the construction industry is getting more and more advanced in that area, actually, in terms of sort of understanding those products and sort of specifying them and the effects of them.
Yeah, I mean, I was interested at one of the Disrupt project workshops. I think it was WSP had kind of their own tool, which was how they design buildings, and the fact that they can automatically have in that kind of design thing the option to say, not just can we use a sort of anonymous reused steel there, but actually have a knowledge of what reused steel is available. So it might involve tweaking the design to make it fit what's available, rather than just saying, this is our design, we need to find something that's exactly to that specification. I think that's a really kind of novel sort of way of doing it. And
yeah, it's that sort of stock matcher tool, isn't it? And those tools are also really good as well, because they also look at, where is the best place to use that reused beam, and making sure that you've also got the material efficiency. So you're not, so you're still being very efficient in your materials, which probably gets a bit overlooked sometimes.
Are there any other game-changing technologies that are helping people in the built environment be more? So I'm thinking in manufacturing, you have sort of blockchain for material provenance, or generative design to help novel design of existing materials. Well, what's changing the game in the built environment space?
Over to you.
Thank you. We have an Innovate UK project as reusefully called Link. That's quite an interesting one in terms of looking at AI. And can AI recognize products in a building? And can they do that quickly? And can they also know the condition of them, who the manufacturer was, the quality, how it's fixed? That's quite early days. That may take off. I don't know. I don't know. More work probably needs to be done in that area, but that's quite an interesting way of doing it. And then there's the whole piece on digital, really. So, you are starting to get more and more of these digital type twins, which really, so you map everything, and therefore you understand how the building works. And I think, they work very well from sort of a repair and maintenance point of view as well. So quite a lot in the digital space. Blockchain, I'm not sure it's used too much in construction yet. I don't know if Amy knows of any projects that yeah.
It's always mentioned. I mean,
I know
in the context of, could a spreadsheet do this? Or is it actually one of those cases where it would work?
Yeah, and I heard something on the radio the other day actually about AI, and they were saying if it sort of goes ahead to how everyone wants it to be, it will have the same energy consumption as a small European country, which makes you really think, doesn't it? Because and their argument was, you should only really be using AI when it really does make quite a productive difference. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've got a fantastic case study at the Sustainable Industry Live event, AstraZeneca, talking about how they can scale AI responsibly. So speaking to that particular challenge, which is front of mind for a lot of people, I know. I'm conscious of the time. I'm keen to understand a little bit more about Innovate's role in a lot of this. You've cited lots of different projects that you've got going on. What can Innovate do for people in the built environment space, and how can people get involved with that?
Yeah, so we've worked with the Alliance for Sustainable Building Products and similar organisations on programmes like our NICER programme, which is the National Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Research Programme, which was a £30 million cross-UKRI programme looking at the challenges of circular economy. This programme is still running, although we had some budgets specifically about sort of getting SMEs involved in the programme, which has all been allocated, but those projects are still sort of ongoing. We're still getting learning out of those. But that is a key thing, is we're trying to make sure that those projects and the broader research programme is developing learning that's of benefit to people beyond those doing just involved in projects. So there is a knowledge hub on the Circular Economy Hub site, which has lots of information about sort of case studies and other learnings. There's a regular series of webinars and other things to get learning out. So there's still those opportunities and, to sort of build on that learning. We've got other programs at the moment which are looking at resource efficiency, materials and manufacturing. Again, trying to make sure we get the learning out of those. And there may be some sort of further funding in that space. we're a bit between spending review timetables at the moment, so we haven't got immediate announcements of here's some big funding. But I've also mentioned things like our net zero heat program. We've also got programs looking at places. So there's just lots of things going on at the moment, hard to list in one space. But I think it's worth sort of knowing that, Innovate's not just about the grants. It's not just about where can I get some funding to do what I want. There's a lot of learning from things that are being done, but there's also a lot of community building that we do on topics. So we're pulling together what we're calling a sprint at the moment to get a community together on this longer in use and reuse topic to really try and find out where the common gaps and where we might need to build consensus on some things, whether it be on this thing like secondary materials exchanges. They don't work very well if we've got 10, 20 different platforms and nobody knows where to look for things. Can we help build consensus on some of those? So that's certainly one of the things where we'd really encourage people to get involved. Tell us, where your challenges are, tell us where your gaps are, and see if we can help bring people together on some common ideas. We also have some things which are run a bit like one of our competitions, but specifically finding solutions for companies. So instead of us running a competition on, say, resource efficiency, we essentially run a competition for a company to find solutions for their needs. So again, if you've got very specific need in a space, then we can sometimes help in that regard.
And we'll obviously link all of the details that you've mentioned there, Amy, in the description below. And you've spoken there broadly about all the things that you're doing in that space. What does it look like for companies getting involved? What do they need to do, and what are the timelines involved for getting involved in those competitions?
Yeah, probably the easiest way to keep involved is there's Innovate UK KTN, which is the Knowledge Transfer Network. They have a sort of single site looking at opportunities available, and that's not just to say the funded things, it's also some of the other events and activities that we're doing. They have a newsletter as well, so you can sign up very specifically what things you're interested in, and that just keeps that sort of drumbeat and awareness going of what things are there, because we understand we can't expect you to keep going to the funding page every other week trying to see something new appears. So they often have foresight of things that are coming, often do workshops, things like consortia building in advance. And it's worth saying as well, a lot of these topics are being covered by European programs. And now that we've got the association back into Horizon Europe, and we're also act as kind of the national contact points, and a lot of the information comes through us to help businesses get involved there. So when we talk about sort of a few £1 million here and there within Innovate programs, we're talking much bigger amounts in the European programs, and we can definitely provide help for companies interested in getting involved there.
Brilliant. And as I say, all of those details will be linked in the description below. But yeah, hugely positive to hear all the work that you're doing, and the fact that we're back in Horizon is obviously a massive win. So to continue on the positive note, as we close off, Katherine, I'd love to know what you're excited about. We've spoken about some of the challenges around circularity in the built environment, but what are you excited about looking forward?
I've been working in sort of construction, demolition waste, circularity for the last 20 years. And I would just say, in the last 2 or 3, there is so much more awareness and people willing to talk and starting to do things. So I'm just really, really encouraged actually by the whole sort of change in people's sort of attitudes towards it. So I just think I was just really excited now to actually do a lot of this. We know what needs to be done. We just need to get on and do it. And it'd just be nice to have lots and lots of different case studies and exemplars and even just sort of more normal practice, if you like, in buildings and circularity.
Brilliant. Well, that's a perfect note to close off on there. We've covered a lot of ground, and yeah, as I say, a lot of the information that we've discussed today will be linked in the description below. Links to all of the competitions Amy has mentioned will be listed. So only thing that's left for me to say is thank you so much for both taking the time. Really enjoyed it, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thanks. Thank you.